Almost all the countries in the world are in debt. The United States has over $38 trillion of debt today, the highest number in its history. The total debt of the European Union is also a massive burden of several trillions. Japan, despite the strength of its economy, has one of the highest debt ratios in the world. Even countries like Saudi Arabia, rich in oil, and major export powers like Germany and China have far larger debts than you might think. And of course, in the face of this picture, one question comes to all of our minds. If everyone is in debt, then who is the creditor of all this debt? Who is collecting this money? This is where the story starts to get interesting, because the debts of nations are not just a burden that needs to be paid back, as we imagine. In fact, they are the supporting pillars behind the scenes of the modern world. Everything, from wars to crises, from growth to collapse, is shaped around the debt system. When you begin to examine these debt loads, you realize a striking truth. The world does not owe money to a specific country or a secret authority. The world actually owes money to itself. But of course, this doesn't mean everyone earns equally. Today, human civilization holds over $315 trillion in total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the world economy. So, how did we end up here? This story doesn't begin with credit cards or digital numbers. Its roots go back much further, to the battlefields. Now, let's go together to the year 1964. England is at war with France, and the treasury is almost out of gold. The king goes to wealthy merchants and says, "You lend us money now. We will repay you with interest from our future tax revenues." This arrangement was so large that the Bank of England was established to manage it, and thus for the first time in history, a state began spending money it had not yet earned. The merchants in return received a promise stamped by the state, a commitment that the government would pay interest, a promise that could be bought and sold. This was the birth of the modern government bond, and also the foundation of modern finance. Then other countries adopted and adapted the system. France copied it, the Netherlands improved it, and the United States built its rise upon it. Thus, debt stopped being a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it became a symbol of power. A state that could borrow was a state that could rule. Once, empires conquered lands to gather gold. Now they issue bonds to collect interest. And so the battlefield moved from swords and shields to balance sheets. Let's return to today. Debt has now become the world's biggest export. The United States has over $38 trillion of debt. Japan's debt far exceeds the size of its economy, and global debt grows massively every year. So who is on the creditor side of all this debt? Let's look at the U.S. first. Roughly half of this $38 trillion belongs to private investors. Not the government, but the markets. And strangely enough, most of these investors are Americans, banks, pension funds, investment funds, insurance companies, even the Federal Reserve. Foreign investors hold about 1/3. Japan is one of the largest foreign creditors. Then comes China, followed by other financial centers. So the phrase, "the U.S. is in debt to China," is true, but that debt makes up only a small portion of the total. In reality, America is mostly in debt to itself. The Treasury issues bonds. American funds and banks buy these bonds. The Fed sometimes buys them back and prints new money in return. Citizens pay taxes, and those taxes return as interest into Americans' retirement accounts. It's like looking into an economic mirror, isn't it? The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly within the same system. This cycle is not unique to the U.S. It is the same worldwide. Japan lends to the U.S. The U.S. supports Europe. Europe provides credit to developing countries. And they place their reserves back into the bonds of developed countries. Everyone holds each other's debt papers, and no one leaves the table. But there is an even deeper dimension: financial markets, hedge funds, giant pension funds, central banks, sovereign wealth funds, institutions managing tens of trillions of dollars. Whether a country borrows cheaply or expensively is often determined not by governments, but by these institutions. The moment they lose confidence, the currency drops, the economy shakes, and even governments can fall. Democracy chooses leaders by vote. But who survives is decided by the markets, and the heart of this system is central banks. Because they don't just manage debt, they create it. When the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys bonds, it creates money in return. Debt in one place becomes an asset in another. Every piece of money circulating today is the reflection of another debt. Here is the truly interesting part. In the modern world, states do not aim to actually pay off their debts. They never intended to. The strategy is not to eliminate debt, but to roll it over, to continuously renew it. This is called refinancing. Debt doesn't end. It is simply transferred. Interest is the result produced by the system. It is like rent paid to keep the structure going. This is why the global economy constantly needs new debt, like a shark that must keep swimming to stay alive. The U.S. has no goal of wiping out its debt. Japan has been rolling over its debt for decades, yet investors still trust it. Because government debt is the strongest guarantee that keeps the system standing. In fact, if the U.S. tried to pay off its debt entirely, one day the world financial system would collapse. Because the world's most reliable financial instrument would vanish. Debt used to mean dependency. Today it means balance. But if that balance breaks, the true face of debt emerges, a promise that can't be held forever. And these promises, debts, are not evenly distributed across society. Interest payments always flow from the bottom upward, from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors who hold the debt. That's why as global debt rises, global inequality rises too. In this system, there are no inherently good creditors or bad debtors, but those at the top earn more, while those at the bottom carry more of the load. In the end, the modern financial system turned debt into money. Governments create it, banks expand it, investors buy and sell it, and citizens live their lives inside this machine. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But if that balance breaks, the illusion ends. History always gives us clues. We just need to know where to look. So what can the billions of people caught in the middle of this cycle do? The truth is, the debt system is designed to protect large structures, not individuals. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything. Because the greatest power is to notice and understand. To understand a system is not to be defenseless against it. The question is, while interest payments flow upward, are we really getting a share of the developed economic growth? Or are we just paying the bill? And more importantly, if the modern economy is this dependent on debt, what happens if this cycle of confidence breaks one day? These are not easy questions, but they are definitely the right questions, and maybe the solution for the future begins by asking them.